Hi there, it's Lara here with your weekly astrology forecast. This one is for the week of April 27th to May 4th, 2021. Welcome. Thanks for being here. So we have what I'm considering a week of sort of checks and balances, I think, riding the waves of this very potent moon cycle, right? And the full moon in Scorpio that we've just come through. And as a matter of fact, at the time I'm recording this, the moon is still in Scorpio, so that intensity is lingering, and Pluto is stationing retrograde, so amplifying that Plutonian energy. Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio. Mars is the ancient ruler. And so this moon cycle has been since the new moon in Aries on April 11th, Aries is a Mars-ruled sign, to the full moon that we just had in Scorpio. Traditionally, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, as I was saying. We've had this very sort of Martian Plutonic energy, right? Mars, the god of war and aggression and assertiveness and action. And then Pluto, the god of the underworld, going in the deep, dark places, the god of death and transformation, and the phoenix rising from the ashes sort of energy, right? So that's we're moving through those very deep, dark, murky waters of Scorpio, and we've got some things happening this week that may further enlighten us as to what this particular moon cycle is bringing our way, and is shining a light on, is illuminating for us, and the process that each of us is going through. A moon cycle is about 4 weeks, right? Where we've got the new moon, which we had on April 11th, and then the full moon, which we've just come through, and then it starts to wind down. So we're still in the same moon cycle, but the moon has waxed all the way to fullness, to this stage of coming to fruition, of bearing fruit, of things have gotten sort of as full as they can, and now a release needs to happen, right? And so over the next couple of weeks, the moon will be waning, and we'll be moving into that part of the cycle where we start to shed things, and we start to kind of take care of those details to wrap things up, so to speak, in relation to this particular moon cycle. And we then eventually, start to kind of prepare for the next moon cycle. But we still have some work to do as far as these particular themes and energies go. So, we're at the precipice of that, or we've just kind of come through the eye of the needle, if you will. And but the moon is still in Scorpio as I'm recording this. And we'll move into Sagittarius Wednesday, today, the day of the release of this video. So that will ideally give us a bit of a break emotionally. The moon in Sagittarius is more optimistic, particularly in comparison to Scorpio, where the moon is in her fall, right? So moon in Sagittarius is a little more optimistic, and that will be a welcome shift, no doubt, but keeping in mind that the moon moves quite quickly, right? And so as our emotions and our lives here on the planet kind of flow, our emotions go up and down, they change. And that is reflected in how quickly the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So moon into Sagittarius Wednesday, and then Capricorn Friday. So it might be a bit of a taking care of business kind of weekend, or, doing something ambitious over the course of the weekend. And then on Sunday, the moon will move into Aquarius, and Tuesday into Pisces. So, before I go any further, speaking of the moon, if you have not yet taken advantage of my free guide to working with the moon that I have over on my website, then now's the time to do that. And the link to that is below, because there are some big changes coming for me and some growing pains I'm working through. So in relation to my business, my website, that sort of thing. So, long story short, I am taking on more of the more sort of control over my website and that sort of thing. So I will be transferring things over to a new site that I have, where I'm in the process of creating myself, and as a result, there's lots of changes coming, but what I will tell you at this point is my existing website will be taken down on May 8th. So if you want to grab that free guide to working with the moon, do that before then. And I will be sending my existing subscribers an email about the changes. And if you want to follow me where I'm headed to my new site and that kind of thing, then I'll let you know how to do that. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm nervous-sighted about it, right? So I've had a lot of things have evolved for me quite a bit since I've been in business for myself, and it's time for a change. And I've had a lot of plans that I just haven't really been able to execute. So I'm hoping that this change gives me the boost that I need, and the sort of more creative, control, and the ability to manage things a little bit better and that sort of thing. So, and part of the thing, I change my mind a lot, right? I have a lot of mutable energy, and I need to try things out to see what happens and what they look like and all of that. And I just, with the new situation and the new setup, I'm much easier able to do that. So enough about me, but I wanted to tell you that because it will directly impact you if you go to my website, if you're ordering readings at the website and that kind of thing. That's going to all evolve and change the way that looks. So in the meantime, you can always reach me. I'm hoping to have something up before May 8th, but I know by now working with technology is not always so simple. And Mercury's stationing retrograde at the end of May. So, but, in the meantime, you can always reach me on Facebook, and the link to that is below, or on Instagram, and here on YouTube. Okay, so enough about that. But I thought it was important to tell you. So I was touching on the fact that Pluto is stationing retrograde. And we talked about this last week in last week's video on the Scorpio full moon, which is still very relevant. So if you haven't seen that, it would be good to jump over and take a look. But I also touched on the fact that Pluto is stationing retrograde, right? Which happens every year. So in that sense, it's not a huge deal, but it's really triggering some between the sort of 24, 26 degrees Capricorn mark in your chart, wherever that falls for you, which is a place where a lot of transformation has been going on for the last couple of years, particularly through 2020. So Pluto's kind of going over that ground yet again, turning over the soil again, right? And last week I spoke to the fact that Pluto retrograde is like an opportunity for taking back our power in some way in relation to where Pluto sits in the chart, right? So for me, for example, I have Capricorn in my 5th house, which has to do with, among other things, creative projects and creative self-expression, and how you sort of shine your light out in the world. It also has to do with children, and how you have fun in life, that sort of thing. So it's a prime example of sort of taking back the power for me in terms of the changes that are coming up, my creative projects and that sort of thing. So, and it's also an internalizing of power, right? Which is true power, as I often say, is that power that comes from inside ourselves. It's not the power that we try to get from outside sources, or other people perhaps try to take our power. In a sense, nobody can take that internal force. So that's happening with Pluto retrograde. And Pluto will be retrograde for the next sort of 5 months. I can't remember the exact date, but I talked about that in last week's video. Next, we have on Friday, the 30th, a fairly significant event. We've got the Sun conjunct Uranus. So this happens every year because the Sun moves around the zodiac once a year, right? The entire zodiac. So it comes into contact with Uranus once a year. So Uranus is in Taurus. And the thing is what I feel is notable, particularly notable about this Sun conjunct Uranus is the fact that we're in this, we're riding the waves of this full moon, and which was exactly opposite, within a few degrees opposition of Uranus in Taurus. So there's something going on here. Like, the story's not over yet. Let's put it that way. The story's not over yet. And when the Sun and Uranus meet up, it's like fire meets electricity. It's like flash fire. That phrase shock and awe kind of comes to mind. Or this whole idea of a revelation, like a major revelation. And like that flash of lightning, right? That just hits out of nowhere. And it's kind of like, it just illuminates things and everything looks completely different. So, because Uranus can have that impact. So the surprises, may not be over yet. Let's just put it that way. And wherever Taurus sits in your chart, as we've been talking about quite a bit, I did a whole video on Taurus season, is where you're likely to experience this, flash of insight, or this surprise, or a sudden event, or twist of fate, or sudden change, that sort of thing. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the myth of Prometheus, because Uranus is likened to Prometheus in the mythology. So Richard Tarnas actually talks about this, and there's, if you can go Google the myth of Prometheus and get the nitty gritty details. I'm not going to give you a big whole mythology lesson here. And that's not my area of expertise anyways, but I wanted to touch on this because I think it's really, sometimes when we look deeply into the mythology, it can be so insightful. And so we can reflect on so many levels in terms of what this means for, the world at large, and what we're going through right now, what it means for us individually, that sort of thing. So long and the short of it is, Prometheus was a Titan, right? And he had a brother who they actually went against the Titans. They fought on behalf of the gods. So they took the side of the gods, and to sort of repay that favor, Zeus, Jupiter, entrusted them to create all the life on Earth. So while Prometheus's brother Epimetheus was busy, dealing with sort of the animals and plants kind of thing, and giving them all their characteristics, and that, like giving the birds the ability to fly, and making creatures that could swim, and all of those things. Prometheus was creating humans out of clay or mud. And as I'm going through this, you may, if you know anything about Christianity, you may, be raising a few eyebrows in terms of the correlation with some of these concepts. So Prometheus was crafting humans out of mud, and he created humans in the image of the gods. But Zeus was like, okay, well, yeah, that's okay, but humans are not equal to gods. Let's just be clear about this. Humans are not gods. So humans will stay on Earth. They will be, mortals rather, and they will worship the gods. So this was what Zeus said, right? And Prometheus, he wasn't really having that. He wasn't very happy about it. So he set out to deceive Zeus by tricking him. He tricked him with an offering of a bull. I'm not going to go into the details of that. You can look that up. But so he tricked him anyways, and Zeus was pissed off. So, as you might imagine. So Zeus decreed that humans were not allowed to use fire. So he was like, fire is not going to be a thing that humans have access to. And then Prometheus was like, oh no, you didn't, right? Prometheus has a bit of a rebellious streak, and we get that kind of idea of Uranus as the modern day ruler of Aquarius, even though Saturn is traditionally the ruler of Aquarius, right? So Prometheus was not having it, and Prometheus said, he decided to go on a stealth mission and climb Mount Olympus where the gods lived. And he then, he stole fire from the gods and came back and brought it back to humans and gave it to humans. So in the long run, that ended up as sort of both a blessing and a curse in some ways, because fire allowed civilization to progress rapidly. I mean, it allowed humans to cook their food and stay warm and alive and take better care of themselves, right? And not spend so much energy on their survival, which then allowed them to progress in other ways. So, a blessing and a curse in some ways. But just to circle back, of course, when Zeus found out that Prometheus had gone against his will and stolen fire from the gods and gave it to humans, then he was really ticked, and he decided to make an example out of Prometheus, right? And basically show, like, you cannot defy the gods. You're not going to go against my will. And so he actually, because he's like, you're not going to undermine my authority, he had Prometheus nailed to a cliff, and every day a vulture would come and attack his liver and tear out his liver, and every night his liver would regenerate. So he was in this endless cycle of suffering, and he was immortal, right? So it wasn't going to end. But even though he was going through this on the daily basis, he never regretted his act of rebellion. He was proud of his defiance, kind of thing, right? And it really showed great resilience. So Chiron, the planetary body that's connected with the concept of wounding and healing, and Chiron in the mythology was a centaur, right? Who was also immortal, and ironically could heal everyone else, but not his own wound. So anyways, Chiron made a deal, and he bargained with Zeus, and he exchanged his own immortality for Prometheus's freedom. So Prometheus was released, and Chiron was Chiron, as a reward, Chiron's soul was placed in the stars. So that's the mythology of it. But the whole idea here is, I mean, there's so many layers we could pick apart and we could talk about here, right? But we are in a time, I think we're in a very sort of Promethean time right now. And there are people rebelling all over the world and rebelling against the authority, right? And there are in a variety of ways, for better or worse. So let's just be clear about that. But there is this opportunity to perhaps, level up in a sense, as humans were able to level up thanks to Prometheus giving them fire. But we want to make sure that we are using what we're gifted responsibly, and that we're not kind of, that the fire is not kind of left unchecked. So that fire that Prometheus gifts humans, we could take it in the literal sense, or we could take it in the metaphorical sense, where fire represents knowledge and, the capacity for humans to kind of capture the power of nature. But how are we going to use that, right? And look where we're at right now in the world, and look at the condition that our planet is in, and all of these things. So, I was nudged to share this with you, and I'll leave you with the story and think about that for your own self, and think about, that Promethean principle and how it's perhaps playing out, or how you can maybe harness it or get to know it a little better in your own life. And right now, Uranus, this idea of Prometheus, is sitting in Taurus, right? And it's disrupting the status quo, and it's disrupting all things Taurian, which have to do with the earth itself, and the world of the five senses, with our sort of human incarnation and the relationship we have to our physical world, and also to the idea of the markets and our natural resources, and all of these things, right? So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. So enough about that. I'm going to move on, and I'm going to talk about a few other things. I'm going to touch on a few other things before we talk a little bit more about Jupiter into Pisces. So on Saturday, May 1st, we have the Celtic festival of Beltane, or Beltana, right? So I just wanted to mention this to you. If you're somebody that is interested in these kinds of things, then you can look it up more yourself. But the whole idea here is that the solar energy is growing, right? That the sun is not at the peak of its power, but it is now taking over in the northern hemisphere. The light is slowly growing, and the baton, so to speak, is being handed over from the lunar energy to the solar energy, right? So it's this gradual handing over of the baton. And it is a time to celebrate. It's no surprise, it's in Taurus season, time to celebrate the world of the five senses. It's a time to acknowledge sort of, the beauty and the pleasure, and that comes with being incarnated into the human flesh. It's a time to enjoy earthly pleasures. And, to the Celts, this was a big fire festival. So people would often light bonfires. And also, one of the things that people, I think, still do today is on the morning of Beltane or Beltana, go out and wash in the morning dew. So anyway, I think my neighbors would think I was a little bit weird, or maybe weirder than they might already think I am if I did that. So that's not something I'll be doing. Anyways, but I thought I'd share that with you. So it's a spoke on the wheel of the year, right? And a time where things are changing, and where we have where we have this, in the northern hemisphere, right? And the western tropical zodiac it was developed in the northern hemisphere, and so it leans toward that. It does not mean that it's not relevant, south of the equator. It definitely is. But, the ancient Celts, for example, who would celebrate Beltane or Beltana, they were oriented towards the seasons in the northern hemisphere. And so, and that's where I live. So for me, that's how I think about things. But I'm acknowledging that that's my own sort of bias and my own experience too. So anyway, but it's really it's this, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. It is just like a time to really, begin to exercise that solar principle within each of us, right? Where we're starting to, because in the northern hemisphere, things are starting to warm up a bit. People are getting outdoors more, for example, and showing themselves more, quite literally, you show more of your flesh. You tend to show more of your flesh in the warmer months, right? So that solar principle of kind of yang, active energy is taking over from the lunar, yin, more receptive energy, which we, in the northern hemisphere, we slip into that around Samhain, which is the opposite on the wheel of the year to Beltane. So happy Beltane if that's something that you plan to mark. And then on Sunday, we have Mercury in Taurus in a trine with Pluto in Capricorn. So a trine is a positive conversation. It's a supportive conversation between the planets. And Mercury, the planet of communication, our thoughts, our words, our ideas, among other things, in a trine to Pluto, right, in Capricorn. The power of Pluto. So it's like the power of our words or our ideas or our communications can be very highlighted at this time, but in a more positive sense, because it is a trine, in a more supportive sense. And then on that same day, we have Venus in Taurus, sextile Neptune in Pisces. And so again, a sextile is a supportive conversation. It's a conversation of opportunity, where the two planets involved are kind of trying to help each other out. And so here with Venus and Neptune, it's like it's like a date with the muse, if you know what I mean, where there may be some creative opportunities that come about. And you can use, when I use the word creative, that is a broad spectrum there, right? But it's a nice time to do something that feels creative and perhaps nurturing. So, nurturing of the senses and that kind of thing with Venus and Taurus. And then on Monday, May 3rd, Mercury is moving into Gemini, where it will be at home. So Mercury's moving out of Taurus, and the energy, like all that compacted energy that we've had in Taurus, will start to dissipate, right? We'll gradually move from Taurus season to Gemini season. And having said that, I haven't shown you the chart. I'll just give you a quick glimpse of it here. So you can see here, we still got all of this energy, right, in Taurus. But as of May 3rd, Mercury will be moving out. And I also want to point out, here's Jupiter. And Jupiter is at 28 degrees of Aquarius, but will be moving into Pisces on May 13th. And this chart is drawn up for the time that the Sun and Uranus, right, meet up. That Promethean principle we were talking about at 10 degrees of Taurus on Friday. So that's the chart. But so all of that concentration of Taurus energy will start to gradually dissipate. And Mercury's the first to leave the party. So Mercury will move into Gemini and go home for a while on May 3rd. And Mercury in Gemini is very, very curious, very social. It's kind of like, think of it like this. Think of like you're socializing with friends and, you're kind of like exchanging ideas. There's a lot of chit chat going on. Maybe in the days when, parties were allowed. They're still not where I live anyway. Or you're going out to like a club or a restaurant or some kind of function, and there's pockets of people chit-chatting all over the place, and having drinks and solving the problems of the world over a couple of drinks. Although, with Gemini, it's more about like gathering the information and exchanging the information than it is digging sort of real deep or analyzing it. That's more Mercury and Virgo. But it can be, Mercury and Gemini can really have us, there can be a lot of communication, a lot of messages exchanged, a lot of chit chat, a lot of information, particularly in the Gemini area of your chart. So that's Mercury moving into Gemini. And then we've got that same day on May 3rd, on Monday, we have the Sun in Taurus squaring off with Saturn in Aquarius. And so it's kind of like, when I was thinking about this, it's kind of like the moment when Zeus found out that Prometheus stole the fire from the gods, right? So the Sun is this solar principle, like it can be people in power or positions of authority when we're talking about it in a more mundane sense. So there can be some friction there between, that solar energy and Saturn, the kind of the taskmaster, or the one who's making sure that we're following the rules. The one who's maybe going to throw some obstacles in front of us to see if we have what it takes to move through them. So a challenge to leaders, potentially a challenge to, even our own sense of authority in some ways, can be that Sun in Taurus square Saturn in Aquarius. But the thing about this is, in some ways, this is not unfamiliar because we've got that Saturn-Uranus square going on, right? We have that tension between the Taurus and the Aquarius area of the chart playing out all year, all 2021, as I've mentioned many times before. And we're moving, like, as we enter June, there'll be another exact square of Saturn and Uranus, but it's the background hum, as I've said many times, right? That tension between whatever house Taurus sits for us and whatever house Aquarius sits when we're talking on a personal level. All right, so let's talk now about Jupiter moving into Pisces. And let's just take a bit of a deep breath and, relax for a sec. Because Jupiter moving into Pisces optimally will allow us to do just that in at least one area of our lives. So Jupiter, poor Jupiter, has been battered around for the last couple of years because Jupiter was in Capricorn in, I think late 2019, right? But all through 2020 and until the very end of 2020 in December when it moved into Aquarius. But Aquarius is also a Saturn rule sign. So traditionally speaking, so Jupiter was very uncomfortable in Capricorn because it's considered in its fall in Capricorn. Again, a sign in its fall or a planet in its fall position is like very uncomfortable, does not feel welcome, like a welcome guest, does not have access to the things it needs to do its job, right? Feels beaten up a little bit. And so Jupiter in Capricorn, that was the experience of 2020. And Jupiter is that principle of optimism, of growth, of abundance, of expansion, among other things. So, Capricorn, Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, really put a damper on things. Jupiter entered Saturn's house and Saturn was like, take your shoes off, sit down. This isn't a time for a party, right? So that kind of sucked for Jupiter. And then at the end of 2020, Jupiter moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. But guess what? Saturn was still the boss. And Saturn kind of was a little bit less strict, perhaps. Saturn in Aquarius is not quite as difficult, I guess, in some ways as it is in Capricorn, but it's still not. There's still no parties going on for Jupiter. I think I might have just said Saturn. For Jupiter, I mean. So here's the thing. On May 13th, Jupiter is moving out of Aquarius for a brief trip into Pisces. So, which is the sign that it rules in traditional astrology. Modern times we say Neptune rules Pisces, but Neptune and Jupiter are the co-rulers, if we want to look at it like that. And, so Jupiter's going home for a bit. Jupiter is finally going to catch a break and be able to let its guard down a little bit and be able to be a little bit more true to nature for at least a little while between May 13th and July 28th. And here's the thing. May 13th to June 20th, Jupiter will be moving forward in Pisces, just at the very early degrees, the first couple of degrees. And then on June 20th, Jupiter will station retrograde and start slowly backing out of Pisces and move back into Aquarius on July 28th for the remainder of 2021. But we're at least going to get a taste of Jupiter moving home for a little bit. So it's not going to get super comfortable, but it's going to definitely be able to, kick off its shoes or wear its shoes on the carpet if it wants, because it's at home. But, just really be able to have access to the tools it needs to do its job for just a little while at least. And so that's going to directly impact, for us personally, whatever house Pisces sits in our chart, right? And potentially the house that Sagittarius rules as well, because Jupiter also rules Sagittarius. So this is some welcome news. And it's not necessarily going to be all sunshine and rainbows. We still have some other difficult aspects going on. We still have that presence of the Saturn-Uranus square going on and coming to exact again in June. But at least Jupiter is not so under Saturn's thumb for a little while. So, look to the house, and we're going to get to this in just a second, that Jupiter's moving into. So where does Pisces sit for you? And start to become aware, like you might be getting just a little bit of a sense of at least what you're hoping, because Jupiter is that sense of hope as well. At least what you're hoping might catch a break in the Pisces area of your chart. And I'm going to take you through some questions to maybe consider in relation to this energy, and so that you can maybe have a bit of a heads up about it and start thinking about it and start maybe anticipating a little bit, right? What this could potentially, how this could benefit you. And one thing I didn't say is that Jupiter takes 12 years, roughly 12 years to move around the zodiac, between 12 and 13 years. So Jupiter was last in Pisces like 12 years ago from 2022. So, because in December 28th of this year of 2021, Jupiter will re-enter Pisces and be there for the whole year. So all of 2022 has Jupiter in Pisces, at home in Pisces. This is a big difference in terms of Jupiter principles than it will have been throughout 2020 and 2021. So that is something to look forward to as far as Jupiter goes. So you might want to look, for those of you who are a little bit more versed in astrology, I'm going to take you through the house where Pisces sits for you. But if you want to go beyond that yourself, you can take a look at the house that Sagittarius sits for you, because that may also get a hit of a little bit more optimism, growth, abundance, those sorts of things. And you can also look to where your natal Jupiter is in your own chart as well. But, and any conversations that Jupiter will be having as it moves through Pisces with natal planets in your chart. So you look at what house is opposite the house that Pisces is in. So what house do you have Virgo in, right? And what's that interplay there? So those kinds of things. And of course, if you want me to take a look at your chart and give you a heads up about that and talk about, the upcoming transits, including Jupiter, then I'm always happy to do that. And you can reach out to me, at my website below, at least until May 8th. And then, in a new location after that. So, yeah, that's for those folks, if you want to look on your own, that may have a little bit more knowledge about your own chart. So I'm going to take you through the questions now to have a think on, and then I'm going to quickly go through each sign and let you know what house Jupiter is entering for you, right? One thing I do want to say before I dive into the questions is that there's always an opposite end of the spectrum, right? Like Jupiter is the great benefic, and it is associated with bringing things that are good and with abundance and optimism and wisdom and justice, and these kinds of like a sense of lightheartedness, joviality, right? That kind of thing. But there's such a thing as too much of a good thing, right? And so Jupiter has this capacity to expand whatever it touches. And so you just want to be careful. Be careful what you wish for. Let's put it that way. Because you don't want to grow things that ultimately, grow out of control, or things that you're not going to be able to manage or get a handle on. Jupiter can be a bit over the top, so too much as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But ideally and optimally, and Jupiter, right, might feel like a party after coming out of Capricorn and Aquarius. So there may be that tendency at first, at least, to kind of be just like, woohoo, let's go, right? So just be mindful of that. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so let's go through some questions here, and then we'll go through each sign. So think about, what do you want to expand in, particularly in relation to the Pisces house, wherever the Pisces house in your chart is, and the themes that surround that, which I'm going to get to. What what are you looking forward to expanding there in some way? And how can you, so this is sort of the next question. How can I invite more optimism in, particularly in relation to that Pisces house and potentially the Sagittarius house as well? Next question. Will I recognize a good thing when I see it, right? And not just be fooled by shiny objects? And the reason that I'm putting this question in there is because, like I said, Jupiter has been so battered up for the last couple of years that we might have a tendency to just kind of go whole hog and just want to be like, just going after everything that looks hopeful or optimistic or fun or joyful or just or whatever. So, it's like, you still have to be like, not be fooled by shiny objects, but also because we've been so used to the downer that has been, kind of Jupiter and Capricorn, and to a lesser degree Aquarius, and all that's transpired under that influence, like under sort of Saturn's thumb. It's like, don't be afraid to kind of believe a good thing when you see it either, because sometimes, I've had this experience. I struggle with this personally. Sometimes there's just been so much weight on your shoulders, and it's just been one thing after the other, one crisis after the other, one ordeal, one dramatic situation, whatever, after the other, that when something good actually happens, you feel like it's too good to be true. And then you hesitate, or you don't enjoy it because you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So, don't do that under this energy is what I'm saying. Don't be fooled by shiny objects, but also allow yourself to enjoy whatever Jupiter is bringing you, right? The good things that it is offering. So there's that. All right. The next question is, with potential abundance of things coming to me, particularly in the Pisces house in my chart, maybe Sagittarius as well, but what will I choose to focus on, right? So where am I going to put my focus so that my energy is not so kind of scattered that I waste the opportunity? How can I grow? Because Jupiter is connected to this concept of growth and expansion. How can I grow in healthy ways, but not out of control, not take it too far? And further to that, what is my relationship to abundance, right? And when I say, so think about that. When I say the word abundance, what do you think? Are you automatically thinking monetary? Are you automatically, thinking about money and having stuff? Or are you thinking of abundance in other ways as well? What is abundance to you? What's your relationship to abundance? It's a good time to kind of think about that and consider that. Another thing is, what sparks joy for me, right? I like to use that phrase. It sounds corny, but so what are the things that you do that bring you a sense of optimism, and the people that you know and are in your life, or that you'd like to be in your life, that are that bring you a sense of joy and optimism and hopefulness, that kind of thing. So think about that. Think about the things that you do and how you can invite more of that in, more joy. I just have two more questions here. The next one is, what wisdom have I gained regarding, what Jupiter's been through over the last couple of years, and how can I put that to good use? Because Jupiter is, he is a teacher as well, a guru. And perhaps how have you kind of connected. Have you connected with a teacher or a guru in some ways? I don't really love that word, but, or have you learned to be your own guru in some ways? What is your connection with that concept? And, like just in general, what wisdom has been gained and over this last couple of years, and how can you put it to good use as Jupiter gains strength in Pisces? And then last question, how can things be more just or more moral? Two concepts Jupiter is also associated with regarding those themes of the Pisces house in my chart, right? So another thing that I'm just thinking of right now to consider is how, it kind of relates to the question of what wisdom have I gained, but Jupiter is about how we sort of view the world, our worldview, the bigger picture ideas and concepts. How have those changed, perhaps? Have you been enlightened to the fact that maybe your way of seeing the world is not everybody else's way of seeing the world? Or have you been surprised by, I think a lot of people have had the experience where, they've maybe learned, there's been some challenges in terms of, people that we know, family, friends, acquaintances even, where we haven't seen eye to eye on certain things. And so that's been a bit of a challenge. And what wisdom have you gained through that experience? All right, so now I'm going to take it through the 12 signs, and I'm going to go fairly quickly here, but just to let you know, what house is Pisces in for you? So, and what themes does that encompass? So that when Jupiter enters Pisces on May 13th for its first little foray home, right? That is giving you a taste of things to come in the Pisces area of your chart that you can expect more of in 2022. Some growth there, some abundance, some optimism, all of those things that we talked about. So we're going to start with Pisces because Pisces, Jupiter's moving into your sign where it hasn't been for 12 years. And this is really nice for you. So I should have said this, but I'm talking about rising sign first and foremost. So listen for your rising sign if you know that. And you can also listen for your sun and your moon sign. And I'm looking at whole sign houses here in these forecasts. So Pisces, for you, Jupiter is entering your first house. And first of all, when a planet enters the first house, it kind of announces itself. Here I am, right? And so it can have, Jupiter entering Pisces can have this feeling for you, this impact on your life in a sort of big way, because the first house is about you. It's about your approach to the world. It's about how the world sees you, perceives you. It's about your physical vitality and your body. It can be about your appearance. It can be about your sense of self in the world, your personality even. So with Jupiter hitting the first house, it's an opportunity to maybe you're going to have a greater sense of optimism, or you will, there'll be like personal growth in some way. Your relationship to yourself, first house, is undergoing a positive change. Sometimes the one thing I will say, sometimes Jupiter moving through the first house can cause us to literally expand physically. So, that's whatever, but something to note. But there's just this sense of greater optimism in your relationship with yourself. It could be you sort of you could be coming out as like the teacher in some way, or the wise one, the kind of the guru in a sense. But people may notice like you got a bit more of a spring in your step than you used to, or than you have in a while, or you may feel that. You may be a little bit more optimistic about your physical vitality and how you're feeling, about your appearance, those sorts of things. When something hits the first house, it has a big impact. So watch for that. In this case, it's Jupiter, and that's a good thing, right? So watch for that through from May 13th, through to the end of July. But keeping in mind, Jupiter's going to retrograde. We'll talk about that in a future video. But overall, that's giving you a taste of things to come in 2022 in terms of Jupiter in your first house. All right, next we have Aquarius. So Aquarius, for you, Jupiter is moving into your second house. And this is an expansion of your resources. So your money, potentially your time, your energy is getting this hit of optimism. Jupiter's moving in there to expand things, to grow things, to bring you more abundance there, to bring you more joy there in some way. The one thing I'll say to be mindful of is overspending potentially with Jupiter in the second house. Don't be breaking the bank. But in general, this can bring you more cash through whatever work you do, whatever services you provide. You could raise your prices. There's also a sense of greater optimism in relation to your self-worth. With Jupiter moving into your second house, and what you value may grow, and there might be a bit of a focus on, like, when we're talking about values, core values, which is one of the things that is sort of indicated by the second house, as I see it anyway. There might be a focus on morals there in some way with Jupiter being there, and justice in some way, but very much a focus on your personal resources, and potentially, gaining in some way, as far as those things go. So I'm going to leave that for you, Aquarius. We're going to move on to Capricorn now, where we've got Jupiter moving through your third house. So Jupiter is going to enter your third house on May 13th. It's going to be there until the end of July, like the 27th, 28th of July. It will station retrograde in June, but it's still going to be in Pisces, which is home for it, right? So you're getting a taste over this time of things to come, and of what Jupiter's transit in Pisces in 2022 may look like for you on a grander scale. So we're just getting a taste of it now. So for you, Capricorn, Jupiter in the third house is bringing an abundance potentially of things like siblings, connections with siblings, and people in your community, even cousins. It can have to do with like short trips that you're taking in the third house. It can have to do with, so like a daily commute even. It can have to do with your communications, and information, commerce, marketing, these kinds of things. So all of those themes have the opportunity to grow, to expand, to bring a greater sense of joy and optimism to you, and growth, and perhaps justice in some way, if that's a thing for you, in your own personal life and experience. There can be technology, vehicles can be a thing here too, when we're talking about the third house. So whatever's going on in your own life regarding those third house themes is getting this hit of optimism, right? Of Jupiterian expansion during that time. And so take note of what's going on for you while Jupiter moves through Pisces for just that short time. And then it's giving you a clue as to, what you have to look forward to in terms of Jupiter moving through Pisces in 2022. All right, next we've got Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, for you, Jupiter's entering your 4th house. Jupiter is your ruling planet, right? And so this is really nice for you. And you've got Jupiter hitting this area of the chart that has to do with your place of living, your home, your family, your roots, your ancestry. It can have to do with, mother figures, parents in general, but I often see it as sort of more mother figures in your life. Your sense of emotional security as well is very 4th house. It's your private life, so there is some kind of expansion going on here, a greater sense of joy and optimism and growth and abundance for you, Sagittarius. So this can look like things like literally like, buying a bigger house or expanding your house, your living space. It can have to do with additions to the family, quite literally. Your family is growing. Or you're just having a greater sense of optimism emotionally. This can be happening as well with Jupiter moving into Pisces in the 4th house. So this is nice, after Jupiter slogging through Capricorn and Aquarius. And it's not finished in Aquarius, like I said in the intro, but we're at least going to get a little taste of things to come, right? Of what Jupiter is going to bring us more of in 2022. So for you, those are 4th house related themes that I just spoke to you about. So that's nice, I really think, for you, Sagittarius. Something to look forward to. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move to Scorpio next, where Scorpio, for you, Jupiter is entering your 5th house. Excuse me. So Jupiter's moving into this house in the chart that has to do with like how we have fun in life, our hobbies, our creative projects, our sense of enthusiasm, children, anything surrounding children, including pregnancy, childbirth, that sort of thing. So Jupiter moving into that 5th house for you is this hit of optimism, of abundance, of growth, of potentially justice as well. And wisdom. So Scorpio, for you, this can be things like Jupiter in the 5th can literally be, having children, getting pregnant, that kind of thing. If that's something for you, it can have to do with a growth in terms of your creative projects. And then, your creative projects bringing you more joy, or your hobbies bringing you more joy. 5th house is also sports. So, that can be something that brings you more growth and abundance and joy and optimism and all of those good Jupiterian things as well. So, I guess the one caution here is like, don't go over the top in terms of the fun factor. Because like I was saying, after the oppression of Jupiter being in Capricorn and Aquarius, right? Saturn ruled signs, we can have this tendency to just really want to go over the top. So just be mindful of that. But that is what you have to look forward to, Scorpio, with Jupiter moving through your 5th house. All right, next we're going to move to Libra. Libra, for you, you've got Jupiter entering your 6th house. So this is your daily grind. This is your daily work, the work you do on the day-to-day, paid or unpaid. This is your health and wellness and issues around that and routines around that. This is relationships between unequal. So like employee-employer relationships, that kind of thing, right? This is how you are in service. This is pets, potentially. So with Jupiter moving into your 6th house, a few things are possible here. Jupiter can bring a greater sense of hope and optimism and joy, and justice and all of these things that Jupiter is related to your daily work. The work that you're doing on the day-to-day, that your daily routine in general. can feel more expansive, which I suppose in some ways, like on the downside, it may be like there's just like it's so full kind of thing. Like there's so much going on that it can be hard to manage. So you just have to do what you need to do to keep that in check. But also your health can see some benefits with Jupiter moving into your 6th house. So if you've been feeling less than healthy, Jupiter can help there and bring you a greater sense of optimism as far as that goes. You might get more pets with Jupiter moving into the 6th house, potentially as well. So that's what you have to look forward to, Libra. And then, Jupiter's going to duck back into Aquarius at the end of July, and we're going to have, it's going to finish up its stay there. But then at the end of this year in December, we'll move into Pisces for the long haul for the year. So that's what you have to look forward to there as far as 6th house goes. All right, next we're moving to Virgo. Virgo, for you, Jupiter is traveling through your 7th house. That's where Pisces sits for you. And so you're having this growth, this optimism, this sense of greater hope and abundance and joy moving through the house of one-to-one relationships, right? So relationships with significant other, with close friends and family members, contracts and agreements fall into this category of 7th house as well. And so this can be good things going on for your partner or those people that you're close to in your life. This can be growing relationships in some way, shape, or form, or more joy through relationship, justice in relationship. It can have to do with, it could even sometimes have to do with like meeting somebody who has that Jupiterian nature about them, who is jovial and larger than life potentially. As well. But good things could be happening for your partner, is one of the ways to look at this. And ideally that benefits you, right? So, but your area of relationship is getting a positive hit of Jupiter. And you're going to see that in the short term between May and the end of July. And then, So take note of what's happening there in terms of partnership and look forward to more of that, right? In 2022 when Jupiter enters Pisces for the year. All right, next we have Leo. So Leo, for you, Leo rising, Leo sun and moon, but Jupiter's entering your 8th house. So for you, this is bringing the way I like to think of it is bringing a little protection and some optimism and some growth to potentially some darker themes, right? H house, no, the 8th house it deals with things like other people's resources. So other people's time, money, energy, but things like your partner's resources that, money that comes to you through business, investors, that sort of thing, taxes, insurance, debt, wills, inheritance, bursaries, all of those things are 8th house. 8th house is also the idea of transformation, that cycle of death and rebirth, and very much about our deep psyche, right? Like what's going on in there, and the wounding and healing kind of concept. So for you, Leo, Jupiter is bringing some hopefulness there, some abundance. This can be like business investors offering you money or catching a break on your taxes, or some kind of like getting some kind of monetary gift or inheritance. On the downside, ideally this is not growing debt, because Jupiter expands what it touches. But just be mindful of that. That's what you don't want to do under this influence, if you can help it. Pardon me. It might be a good time to connect with a teacher or a therapist or somebody that, can help you kind of deal with the skeletons in your closet, so to speak. And that could go well. So, ideally, this is positive things transpiring there in terms of other people's resources and how that impacts you in terms of your entanglement with other people, and those eighth house themes that we spoke about. So I'm going to leave that there, Leo, and I'm going to move to Cancer next, where we have Jupiter traveling through your ninth house. So between May 13th and July 27th. And then, making a return to Aquarius for the remainder of this year, but then we'll re-enter Pisces at the end of December and be in Pisces all of 2022. And so we have that to look forward to. But this is giving us a taste of what that's about for us. So for you, Cancer, that's ninth house themes, which has to do with things like long distance travel. So, if you haven't been able to travel, maybe you'll get a chance to take a trip between that time that Jupiter is in Pisces, or plan a trip that you might take in 2022. Or, a greater sense of like optimism about the possibility for that kind of thing. This can be, ninth house deals with your connection to foreign people and places. And so there can be an element of that growing there, optimism or abundance coming in. Higher learning is the ninth house, right? Teaching and learning and publishing. So there can be growth in that way and some optimism in that way. If that's something that impacts your life directly. So, education in general has been very impacted with COVID and the way that we do education. And I spoke to you recently about the issue that's going on with the university locally here. So, if you're Cancer rising or somebody with a lot of Cancer in your chart, then you might see some optimism in relation to those themes of higher learning and teaching, and you might catch a break there, some justice, that sort of thing, right? All those Jupiterian things. So that is for you, Cancer. And I'm going to move to Gemini, where we have Jupiter traveling through your 10th house. So May 13th to July 27th, Jupiter will be in Pisces and hitting your 9th house, giving you a taste of what's to come when Jupiter moves into Pisces for an entire year. The entirety of 2022, right? So this is giving you a taste of what that could be about for you. And so the 10th house is your public house. It's the house that has to do with your career, with your public life, your public reputation, your sense of authority, your relationship to authority, the legacy you wish to leave. And so these are themes that can have a hit of optimism, of growth, of abundance. There can be quite literally, like, maybe your career is growing. There might be a stroke of luck that happens there in terms of your career. There might be you may get a chance to kind of shine as a Jupiterian, in a Jupiterian way, as the guru or the teacher, or the one bringing justice or calling for justice, or the one who is sharing the abundance, or abundance may come to you through, authority figures or your career, that sort of thing. So that is for you, Gemini, to consider the questions that I posed and just get an idea, what's going on for you and what are you looking forward to Jupiter potentially bringing you. coming up there in mid-May. Oh, I have a cat trying to come and join me. All right, so next we have Taurus. Taurus, for you, Jupiter will be moving through your 11th house. So starting May 13th, Jupiter will enter your 11th house and then be traveling through there for a short time until the end of July. But giving you a taste of what's to come in 2022 when Jupiter moves through Pisces for the whole year. So for you, Taurus, this is Jupiter bringing a sense of optimism and growth and joy and abundance and potentially justice, if that's a theme for you, in relation to the group, to friends, to allies, to organizations, potentially online connections and networks and that sort of groups in that sort of way. Your hopes and dreams for the future. This is quite nice. Jupiter moving through here can grow your friendship circles, can grow your online communities, can bring you a sense of joy and hope and optimism through those avenues. Your alliances can grow and have a sense of being very supportive. You can also it might even be like, money comes to you through friends in some way, or through a group in some way, through a membership, if that's something that you run or something like that. It could be themes of like group justice I can see as well with Jupiter moving in, through the 11th house. So think about what that means for you and take note of what's tweaked, or when Jupiter moves into your 11th house, and think about, okay, so this is a taste of things to come. How can I prepare? How can I lay the groundwork to have even more of the goodness of Jupiter in 2022 when it moves into Pisces for the whole year? All right, next and last but not least in this case, we've got Aries. So Aries, for you, Jupiter is moving through your 12th house. And so Jupiter in the 12th house is bringing a greater sense of potentially optimism, of peace, of joy, of abundance. In terms of, like, this is an interesting one, but in terms of kind of what goes on behind closed doors, maybe solitude. The 12th house is kind of like a house that we think of it like of isolation in a sense. So it can be like things like places that are tucked away from the world, like spiritual retreat centers or hospitals or prisons or rehab facilities, these kinds of things. It can be how we spend time in solitude, right? How we retreat from the world. It can have to do with the unseen world and our connection with spirit and our spiritual and mental health even. The 12th house speaks to our the ways we may sabotage ourselves, and that can come from an unconscious place. So Jupiter moving through here can be an opportunity for some growth and abundance and hope coming through those avenues. It can be a good time for like some kind of a retreat that brings you a sense of optimism, and abundance. It can be like losses or endings that actually have a silver lining. It can be, it can even be like some kind of like spiritual teacher coming, into your awareness. And it's not necessarily something you announce to the world, or you're feeling a connection in a positive sort of beneficial way to the spirit world potentially. if that's something that, appeals to you. So, I would say that with Jupiter moving through this house, it's a really good time for healing things that maybe like ways that you're sabotaging yourself. Ideally, you don't want this to grow those things, but or finding a teacher that can help you do that, or you being the teacher, like leading a spiritual retreat or leading some kind of retreat in some way, potentially as well. Or like I said, some sort of an ending or a loss or something, like getting closure on something that feels more optimistic, right? In the long run, that brings a bit of a silver lining, that has a silver lining to it. So that is what I have for you, and all 12 signs. And I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button too. Okay, so take good care, and I will see you next week.